Hi, my name is Moshe Shechner. I'm a PhD student in Tel Aviv University, advised by Uri Stemmer and Edith Cohen. In this talk, I will present the main results that are given in the paper, A Framework for Adversarial Streaming via Differential Privacy and Difference Estimators. This is a joint work of Idan Attias, Edith Cohen, myself, and Uri Stemmer. So, this talk consists of 4 parts. First, we discuss the setting of streaming in the classical sense. This setting is also called the oblivious setting. So we'll talk about what is streaming. Then we describe the setting that we will focus in this talk, the adaptive or adversarial setting. Then we survey some prior work for methods for transforming algorithms that are designed for the oblivious setting to be robust in the adaptive setting. And lastly, we describe our paper results. Okay, so what is streaming? Streaming is a problem setting that has requirements for both the input form as well as constraint on the space complexity of the algorithm. It is commonly used to model very large datasets. A stream is a sequence of data elements that consist the input. For example, the input can be a stream of packets that going through a router. And the problem will be to estimate some statistic over this stream. It is also common to think of the input elements of the data arriving one by one in an online fashion. The constraint is that the algorithm space must have sublinear space in the length of the input. And in particular, it cannot store the input. As an example, for a standard streaming problem, we now look on the problem of distinct elements. So we're just going to play a game. And the goal here is to count the number of distinct elements, which are going to be the presented emojis. Just try to count. So we have a lion, and a koala, and so on. Dragon. Okay, so how many different images were there? So the correct answer is 11. Okay. Formally, we focus on the following functions. So the input is a sequence of elements from a countable domain X, and the sequence is the length of M, and the function under consideration that we wish to estimate is a function that transfers from such sequences to the real line R. And the goal is for each time t and the prefix of the sequence st, we want to output and estimate f hat of this prefix such that this estimation would be 1 plus minus alpha factor away of the true value of the function over the prefix. So streaming is a subject that was studied extensively, and a seminal result was given in '96 by Alon, Attias, and Zegedi. And in their seminal paper, they showed that there exists an algorithm that alpha approximate the f2 function that we'll discuss later in the streaming model with space complexity of alpha to the minus 2 times log n. And n here is the size of the domain. Alpha is the approximation factor parameter. This work was followed by a rich literature giving low space approximation algorithms to many interesting problems. And many of these results were algorithms that are randomized. And here we have a problem. The problem that can arise is such randomized algorithms, in many cases, their analysis assumes that the input stream is fixed in advance. But the thing is that in many real-world applications, this is not the case. And so we now discuss the two models that we are interested in. First, the classical and the oblivious settings we discuss now, and later the model that we focus in, the adaptive setting model. So in the oblivious setting, first we have a random string R that is drawn for some distribution rho, and it will be used in the algorithm. And then for m rounds, the algorithm receives a query qt for time t and must provide an answer at. And the assumption is that for all time t, the questions, the queries, are fixed in advance. And so many space-efficient algorithms exist, and this assumption is many times is used in the analysis, and it's crucially used. And okay, so our focus is in the adaptive setting. So now we have a controller that completely controls the stream. So we don't have this previous assumption. So what we still have the same, that a random string is drawn in the beginning of the process from some distribution rho. And for m rounds, we still get query and must provide an answer. But now the query qt may depend on all previous answers. It means that the controller is aware of all of the previous answers, and then it can generate whatever query that you want for the next stage. So the question is, can we give guarantees for existing oblivious algorithms under adaptivity, under this setting? So another question is, why do we even care about this adaptive setting? So the first answer is that we already said it, that just may appear naturally. Whenever there is a system with a feedback, so the adaptive setting arises, and then maybe some analysis breaks. But it's also interesting to consider the following, that there is an adversary that controls the stream, and it actually tries to fail the algorithm. So the feedback is not natural, it is controlled by some adversary that tries to control the algorithm. And this is interesting to look on the from theoretical point of view in order to draw the limits of certain methods or find the hardness of problems. Okay, so by now we established the following, that randomized streaming algorithms may be not robust to adaptive inputs. So a first approach to robustify them would be just design new algorithms. For example, deterministic algorithms are immune to adaptivity, but in the case of deterministic ones, some problems have already been shown that they have no sublinear deterministic algorithms. Additional robustification approach may be to take existing oblivious algorithm and to make them robust. How? Using graphing techniques. And this robustification approach was shown in these 5 works, and we will focus on this approach, and we describe these 3 first one, and our result is the 4th one. Okay, so we already described what is streaming, and we also described streaming in the adaptive adversarial setting, which will be the focus in the remaining of the talk. Now we move on to talk about prior methods for transferring oblivious existing algorithm to adversarial robust one. And finally, from the existing prior methods, we will describe also our results. In this line of work, the first general wrapper is the sketch switching technique presented by BJWY. In a high-level, sketch switching technique achieves its robustness by using different oblivious streaming algorithm for every output modification that is needed. Then, a follow-up work by HKMMS used a different approach to achieve robustness. They used a tool from differential privacy in order to protect the internal randomness of these oblivious algorithms, and thus showing an interesting connection to DP. Another interesting work is due to WZ that achieved robustness via the same technique of pitch WY, and they improved the space complexity by looking on a new oblivious algorithms, namely difference estimators, and combining several types of them in a clever way improved the space complexity of the whole framework. And our work combines these two later works and their ideas into a hybrid framework. We now describe the work of Ben Eliezer, Jairam, Woodruff, and Yogev. And the main observation of this work is that if we need an alpha approximation of f, so we don't really need to modify the output many times. We actually need to modify the output only when our estimation changes by a factor of 1 plus minus O of alpha. And this observation led to a stream characterization that actually defined the number of times that an output modification is needed. And this stream characterization is the following. It's called the flip number. Flip number of a stream or of a function is the following. Giving a function, the flip number giving some stream is the number of times that the value of the function for this stream is changed by 1 plus minus alpha factor. And this is denoted by lambda. So again, this characterization can be of a stream or of a function. And we talk about a function, we talk about the maximal over all of the stream of some length n. Okay, so the algorithm in high level is as follows. First get an input, lambda, the flip number bound on the stream, and an oblivious algorithm A from the problem under consideration. Of course, we also have alpha, the approximation factor parameter, and S, the input stream. And so, at first, the algorithm, the framework, the sketch wizing algorithm is initiating O of lambda instances of the oblivious algorithm A. Then, for each of the rounds, it feeds the update to all of the instances. And if there is a need to modify the output, use the current instance estimation and then throw it away and never use it again. So why it is robust? Intuitively, for each estimator A tau, where tau is the selector of the current estimator, only a single estimation is modifying the output. After that, we never use it again. And so it's very informal, but we throw away after some information is leaking regarding the internal randomization. So the takeaway from the sketch switching technique is that we can transform any oblivious streaming algorithm to adversarially robust one with a blowup of factor O of lambda in space. So whenever lambda is small, this is very good. But if lambda is large, which is the case in some cases, it can be improved. So we now move on to talk about some functions that under some input cases have a large flip number. In order to discuss the flip number bounds for some functions with respect to two different input settings, we now look on the frequency moments functions. So the stream is the elements are pairs, element Si from countable domain X and corresponding integer delta I. We think of some underlying vector that is not explicitly maintained in the algorithm, U, that is maintained or updated with respect to the updates. So the goal is to estimate Fp, which is defined as follows, and P is the parameter. So in our paper, we show an application for a specific function from this family, F2. So the goal in F2 is to estimate this function, and why is F2 is important? It's because This is a statistic that is used to measure level of homogeneity across the frequencies in the following sense. We think again about the frequency vector, and each entry of the vector is a count of the appearances of the stream of the corresponding element. So for some fixed L1 norm of the vector, the F2 gets the minimum whenever the entries are all equal, if it's possible, and the value of the function increases when the values are concentrated on less and less entries. So let's examine the flip number for this function, for F2. Okay. So we look on two streaming models. Insertion only is the model when we are not allowed to have negative updates, and in the turnstile model, any update is allowed as long as it's bounded under some constant. So the flip number of F2 in the insertion only model is 1 over alpha times log m, and in contrast, the flip number of F2 in a turnstile model is O of m, and m is the length of the stream, so it's quite large. The second work we look on is by Woodruff and Zhao. In a high level, the main observation of WZ is that whenever the output modification is of some small difference with respect to the value of the output, of the previous output, then there is no need for a high accuracy estimation of the new output. And in that way, they try to save space. That could be achieved provided that there exists a new kind of algorithm that estimates differences of the function that under consideration. So, assuming that there exists such algorithm and its estimation cost is cheaper, then we can save in the estimation of the small step. This is the first idea. If that could be done, the one could estimate a small output modification with space complexity that is improved with respect to the one of the given oblivious algorithm A. For example, for a relative alpha step, the space cost is improved by a factor of alpha. Indeed, WZ showed existence of these for many interested problems as well as for F2. These DEs are initialized with a step size parameter gamma, allowing them to estimate differences for some bound defined by this parameter. And by clever management, they showed that it is possible to combine several different step size DEs to achieve near tight results for the insertion only setting. Yet, for the turnstile setting, their method is theoretically weaker than the method of HKMMS in the regime where lambda is large at the turnstile setting. So, the takeaway here is that WZ showed an interesting method that saves the blow-up space with a factor of alpha. Okay, so by now we saw the following methods. We saw sketch switching technique that modifies the output only when we must, and that gave us space blow-up of O of lambda, the flip number. And we also saw the difference estimators, which is we have a space blow-up of alpha times lambda, which is a great improvement. And also for the insertion only, for many functions, this is a tight bound because lambda is small. But for the turnstile, lambda can be quite large. And the question is, what can you do in the turnstile setting? Okay, so now we describe the third work in this line of work, which is by Hasidim, Kaplan, Mantzur, Attias, and Shechner. And they show a nice connection to DP, as well as a very nice technique that also is used for other results. And the algorithm is as follows. Again, we initialize many instances of the oblivious algorithm that is received as an input, but now we only initialize O of square root of lambda, the flip number. And we still feed the updates to all of these instances, but we look all the time on all of their estimations, and we generate the output out of the aggregation of all of these estimations together. So why it is robust? Well, intuitively, because each estimator has a secret, the random string, and we use privacy to protect these databases of the random strings. It's not straightforward, but this is the high-level idea. We protect the random strings together. And this method gives us an improvement of a quadratic improvement with respect to the BJWY. And again, the space block we get is O of square root of lambda, the flip number, which is again a quadratic improvement. So let's move on to look at a recap. So in the insertion only model, the difference estimator is nearly optimal. So for any problem that someone constructed a difference estimator, it's a great method. Without constraints, which means that we are in the turnstile model, not in the insertion only model, so we get the following blow-ups. Sketch switching, we have O of lambda, difference estimators alpha times lambda, and in robust sketch, in the DP technique, we get a blow-up of square root of lambda. So the question is, can a combined approach achieve the best of both worlds? Because each method wins in a different regime. So the answer is yes. And exactly what we do, we present a hybrid framework that takes both of these ideas to combine them to a hybrid one. So first, we take all of the same type difference estimators that are used throughout the framework, and we group them in a set, and then we protect each of these sets with the technique of differential privacy. It's not straightforward because we need to introduce a generalization of the difference estimator, the toggle difference estimator. We also needed to change the framework in order to fit our new needs. And then we got that in general we have a space blow up in this hybrid framework of square root of alpha lambda, which beats both of the previous. And the second result is an application for F2. So F2 doesn't have a difference estimator in the turnstile setting, but it has for the insertion only setting, and it can fail in the turnstile setting. So the idea is to characterize whenever this existing construction fails in the turnstile setting. And then we came up with a new stream characterization. We call it twist number, that captures exactly that, the number of times that for any stream this difference estimator would fail. And then we introduced a monitor that captures these failures, and whenever it captures a failure, it just resets the framework, which comes with a cost. And for turnstile, the combined approach, we get the following space complexity. So we have this alpha minus 2, which is the space complexity of the oblivious algorithm, and this is the blow up. So the blow up is square root of alpha lambda plus mu, and the mu is bounded by lambda. So here is the sum up of the comparison of all of the four works that were mentioned. So in terms of general blow up, not for a specific application, so the new method wins all of the above. For F2, the insertion only model, so both of WZ and ACSS achieve optimal results, or near optimal results. And for F2 in the turnstile setting, our result is can be better than HKMMS or equivalent to it. If mu is large, it is equivalent. Okay. So these were the citations that we used throughout the talk, and that's it. Thank you.